Welcome to This Explainer. Today we're tackling a concept that is absolutely going to challenge our everyday understanding of history. When we look back at the mechanics of power and the reigns of ancient god kings, we tend to have this very simplified, almost, storybook picture in our minds of how these rulers actually operated. But the historical reality? It reveals a fascinating, high-stakes system of survival, psychology, and literally theater. We're going to look really closely at the facts directly from our sources today to uncover how leadership truly functioned in the ancient world. So, let's get right into it.
Okay, let's dive into this. Did ancient kings just inherit unquestioned absolute power by putting on a crown? It's a universally understood myth, isn't it? We see it in movies, in books, and pop culture all the time. The idea of a monarch who's just handed the kingdom by birthright, lazily sits on a super comfortable throne, and suddenly wields this limitless, unquestioned authority over everyone. But as we're going to explore, early emperors lived a vastly different reality. The crown definitely wasn't a free pass to do whatever they wanted. It was actually a heavy, incredibly dangerous burden that had to be constantly, and I mean constantly, justified. We really tend to imagine this unquestioned, absolute power inherited simply by wearing a crown. But the historical reality is so much harsher. Actually, scratch that. It was brutal. Becoming a ruler required surviving rigorous physical trials and executing incredibly complex religious performances. Why? To prove that the gods had actually chosen you. You didn't just inherit the job and coast through life, no way. You had to continuously, actively prove you were divine material. The appearance of power might have looked absolute from the outside looking in, but the internal reality was demanding and required constant validation. Section 1. The global pattern of legitimacy. How distinct empires proved divine selection. This intense demand for proof wasn't just some localized fluke in one part of the world. It established a universally recognized standard for ancient leadership across completely different, distinct empires globally. Take the mandate of heaven in ancient China. This was a doctrine where a ruler's legitimacy was strictly, undeniably tied to divine approval and selection. The emperor was known as the Son of Heaven, but that ultimate title was entirely conditional. If you didn't meet the highest divine standards, the mandate could literally be ripped away from you by the cosmos. Your right to rule and your whole family's right to the dynasty was completely dependent on maintaining this ongoing celestial endorsement. Let's move to Rome and see how this built. Because halfway across the world, we see the exact same underlying logic in the Inca Empire. Through the Moral Trials of the Sapa Inca, leaders were put through incredibly rigorous ethical and physical tests. You couldn't just claim the throne because of who your parents were. For instance, aspiring Inca rulers had to endure harsh physical endurance races and these intense periods of fasting just to demonstrate their stamina. Meanwhile, their ethical character was tested through extremely strict frameworks where even a minor lapse could entirely disqualify them. You had to physically and morally demonstrate that you were worthy of holding the ultimate authority. And this brilliantly illustrates the clear, undeniable global pattern we are talking about. This standard is further mirrored by the Egyptian concept of the living royal K. This was the pharaoh's physical embodiment of divine essence as the absolute proof of their rulership. The pharaoh wasn't just acting as some representative for the gods, they were expected to actively embody this divine energy in their physical form, participating in exhausting daily rituals to sustain the universe itself. When you tie these three distinct cultures together, the Chinese Mandate of Heaven, the Inca Moral Trials, and the Egyptian Royal K, you see a perfectly aligned triad. Across the world, empires demanded the exact same thing from their kings: literal, indisputable proof of divine selection. Section 2. The Science of Disaster. The Biology of Ritualized Leadership. So why did these trials matter so much? Why were early empires literally obsessed with proving divine legitimacy? To understand this, we've got to bridge the gap from ancient history directly to biological science, because this was fundamentally about literal survival. Early civilizations faced devastating floods, severe droughts, and widespread famines. They didn't just read about these things. They literally lived or died based on these specific biological and environmental realities. When the river flooded too high or the seasonal rains completely failed to arrive, an entire empire could starve to death. Because of this, the general population needed absolute, unwavering certainty that the person in charge could navigate these massive existential threats. So the crucial point is how this played out in reality. When a natural disaster struck the empire, it triggered this crucial loop. The ruler had to step up immediately, perform a specific trial or ritual, and actively manage the crisis. Through this action, divine legitimacy was practically and scientifically proven in the eyes of the people.
An emperor's right to rule wasn't just an abstract philosophical concept, right? It was scientifically tied directly to their ability to manage natural catastrophes. If the emperor fixed the famine, the gods favored them and their reign continued. If they failed to turn the tide, well, their legitimacy vanished instantly, often taking their life right along with it. Section 3. The Sacred Performance. Calculating every move for divine proof.
Now, what's really interesting about this slide is the psychological reframing of this power. When your literal survival and the survival of your entire empire rests on proving you can control the forces of nature, the crown stops being just a shiny symbol. Instead, it becomes a prop in a highly rigorous, intensely calculated daily routine. Rulers utilized an incredibly calculated range of actions. One moment they're washing the feet of the poor to display extreme humility, and the very next they're sitting in complete unreachable silence to project otherworldly stoicism. Neither of these actions were accidental. They were meticulously planned to convey a very specific message about their divine right to lead.
And that brings us to the core argument here. Leadership is a sacred performance. Every single action is a calculated move to prove divine legitimacy to the masses. I want you to completely reframe how you think about these historical figures, based on what we've learned today. They weren't just sitting back, relaxing, and enjoying the spoils of absolute power. Leadership was an ongoing, exhausting, high-stakes performance that never, ever truly stopped. The curtain simply never went down for an ancient god-king. Which leaves us with a pretty provocative question. If ancient god-kings had to constantly perform to prove their power, is modern leadership just a different kind of sacred performance? Take a look at the world around you today. Think about how modern leaders present themselves, the highly calculated moves they make during a public crisis, the very specific images they project to the masses. Are we still demanding a sacred performance for legitimacy, just wrapped in a different costume? It is definitely something to think about. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer. I really hope this structured look at the data has completely shifted your perspective on the mechanics of power. Keep questioning, keep learning, and I'll see you next time.